without the mustache. I am the critic of critic because I'm not hypocritical. I love entertainers. I mean, when I'm in New York, I think of my good friends like Nathan Lane.
It begins with a glittering sign, 10 letters tall, cut into the California hills, Hollywood. To the world, it was the land of giants, actors who towered across movie palaces, men so commanding they seemed larger than life. But that was just the illusion. Hollywood's biggest secret wasn't about scandals, affairs, or contracts. It was about height. For decades, studios lied to America about their leading men. They dug trenches on movie sets. They hired shorter actresses. They paid for custom elevator shoes every 6 months. One studio spent more than $100,000 just digging holes so their star could look taller. Another wrote contracts that forbade co-stars from being above a certain height. The public never knew. So how did they fool everyone? How did they make men who stood just over 5 feet look like titans? This is the story of Golden Age Hollywood's shortest stars and how they turned small stature into big legend. Take Mickey Rooney. He stood only 5'2", the shortest leading man of all classic Hollywood. Yet for 3 years straight, 1939, 1940, 1941, he was bigger than Clark Gable, Cary Grant, even Gary Cooper. MGM made more money from him than any of them. His small size helped him play Andy Hardy, the all-American teenager, even though he was already in his 20s. Audiences adored him. 16 Hardy films poured out, and if you adjust the box office to today's money, they made nearly $2 billion. In the Great Depression, Mickey Rooney was America's optimism wrapped in a boy's body. His boyish face, jittering energy, and compact frame made him the image of resilience. But the very thing that made him a star almost destroyed him. When World War II ended, Rooney returned home with a Bronze Star on his chest. He was a soldier now, but Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. He was no longer a kid, but too small to be taken as a grown man. Casting sheets scribbled the same 2 words again and again: height problem. Romantic scenes felt awkward. Rooney himself joked he had to stand on a box just to kiss his co-stars. His $5,000 a week salary collapsed. By 1950, he was pushed into B-movies and low-budget crime films. And yet, he fought back. Playing worn-out boxing trainers and beaten fight coaches, Rooney turned his size into vulnerability, even grit. He scored 2 Oscar nominations. By 1979, Francis Ford Coppola revived him with The Black Stallion. Playing a retired jockey, his stature was finally perfect. The film earned $40 million, and Rooney another Academy Award nod. Decades after his boyhood rise, he had proven again, no one could count Mickey Rooney out. Sammy Davis Jr. never topped 5'3", but when he hit the stage, he seemed to tower over the world. Born into a family of entertainers in 1925, he was on stage dancing by the time he was 3. His shoes shined like mirrors, his steps impossibly quick. But nightclub owners in the 1940s didn't want him. Too young, too black, too short. Later, he lost an eye in a car crash. By all accounts, he did not look like a star. But Sammy didn't care. He turned every rejection into applause. He could mimic Gene Krupa on drums, swing into Sinatra ballads, then dance until the crowd gasped. And when the whispers about his size came, he made them part of the act. "I'm a one-eyed Negro Jew, and on top of that, I'm short," he'd joke. And the room would erupt in laughter before he silenced them with a song. Even in 1964, when Broadway worried that he was too small for a love story opposite a tall Swedish actress, Sammy flipped the script. He trained until his boxing scenes were blurs. He demanded lighting that stretched his shadow across the stage. Golden Boy became a smash. He got a Tony nomination, and a critic called him the littlest heavyweight in town. Vegas had once refused him hotel rooms. By 1968, he was pulling $35,000 a night with contracts that forced casinos to integrate audiences. He released 50 albums, hit #1 with the Candyman, starred in 38 films, and won Emmy, Grammy, and Tony nominations. By 1987, he was honored at the Kennedy Center. The short kid who wasn't supposed to be a star had become one of the biggest names in America. James Cagney wasn't the 6-foot bruiser Warner Brothers claimed. His Army record set it plain, 5'5", shorter than the average man of his era. Too short, the experts thought, for a gangster or a hero. But Cagney didn't tower, he charged. In The Public Enemy, when he shoved a grapefruit into Mae Clark's face, he radiated like a firecracker. His energy coiled and ready to explode. His size didn't diminish him, it sharpened him. Studios tried to cover it up. Crates, angles, shorter co-stars. But audiences didn't care. They couldn't take their eyes off him. Off-screen, his stature never stopped him from standing tall against studio bosses. Once, in 1936, he climbed onto a golf cart just to look 6-foot Jack Warner in the eye and demand equal pay with Edward G. Robinson. He won. Directors built scenes around his physicality, like White Heat, where he raced through an oil refinery, climbing ladders, weaving catwalks, explosions behind him. The camera darted to keep up with him. A taller man would have knocked his head on the rafters. Cagney turned his compact size into dynamite. By the end, critics weren't talking about how short he was. They were talking about how big he played. The AFI ranked him the 8th greatest male star of classic Hollywood. Edward G. Robinson stood the same height, 5'5", born Emanuel Goldenberg in Bucharest. He came to New York without English, without height, without Hollywood looks. Casting directors saw a short, round-faced immigrant. But Robinson forged himself into something new. In front of mirrors, he practiced every curl of the lip, every arched brow, every hammering tone of voice. When people laughed at the thought of a tiny gangster, Robinson bared his teeth. Then came Little Caesar. As Rico Bandello, he filled the screen with menace so fierce that Time magazine marveled at his 5'5" frame, filling the screen with danger. Warner Brothers lied, listing him at 5'9", shooting him from low angles, forcing taller actors to slouch. But box office numbers didn't lie. A $280,000 budget, a $1.5 million return in the middle of the Depression. Soon Robinson was earning $85,000 a picture, close to $2 million today. He even won script approval, a privilege reserved for giants like Gable. Off-screen, he joked that his small frame made him half the target for Nazi snipers when he volunteered for frontline USO tours. He donated a fortune to anti-fascist causes and built one of Hollywood's greatest art collections. His body was short, his shadow was immense. Charlie Chaplin was 5'5" as well, but he shrank himself further. Baggy trousers, a too-tight coat, a bowler hat, a thin cane. He made himself look like a child in grown man's clothes. But when he moved, the spins, the pratfalls, the dancing agility, his smallness became strength. Standing beside towering policemen in The Kid, he stole every frame. Columbia University studies even found that audiences reacted more viscerally when tall bullies lifted Chaplin's tiny tramp by the collar. People felt protective, invested, desperate for him to win. Chaplin used it with precision. In City Lights, he faced a boxer with a far longer reach, but Chaplin danced, weaving and dodging, turning comedy into victory. By 1923, he was the highest-paid actor alive, earning more than Douglas Fairbanks, who was 4 inches taller. His height even saved money. Shorter shots required less film, trimming costs by 12%. Off-screen, Chaplin took control of his destiny, co-founding United Artists. Physical inches matter less than creative control, he declared. By the 1950s, his fortune topped $500 million in today's money. Exiled during the Blacklist era, his films still circled the globe. The Tramp may have been small, but his legacy was monumental. Then there was Buster Keaton, just 5'5", called the Great Stone Face. On stage as a child, his father tossed him around like a rag doll, teaching him how to fall, how to roll, how to survive. His low center of gravity gave him balance others couldn't match. Physics professors later calculated that his compact build made him harder to topple, able to take impacts taller men couldn't. He risked everything for stunts. In Sherlock Jr., a torrent of 2,000 liters of water slammed him to the ground, fracturing his neck. He didn't even realize until doctors found it years later. In Steamboat Bill Jr., A 2-ton building facade fell straight toward him, missing his head by 3 inches, only because he had marked the exact spot the night before and stood perfectly still. Hollywood paid attention. By 1927, Keaton was making thousands a week, running his own studio, yet his height was still mocked. In the general, Civil War soldiers towered over him. In Our Hospitality, co-stars walked on stilts, but Keaton never cracked a smile. His blank stare became legend. When sound ended his silent kingdom, his career crashed, but television resurrected him. In the 1950s, audiences rediscovered his artistry, the small man who could fall endlessly and always rise again. Peter Lorre was 5'5", some say shorter, but on screen, he was vast. In Fritz Lang's M, he played a child murderer with eyes darting like trapped animals, a performance so haunting Berliners swore they saw him in the streets and called the police. The film sold hundreds of thousands of extra tickets. Hitchcock saw him, cast him, and Hollywood followed. Studios leaned into his size, pairing him with giants like Sidney Greenstreet. Posters advertised Little Pete beside the 6'4" Titan. Audiences loved the contrast. Variety reported box office sales jumped 22% when they appeared together. By the mid-1940s, Lorre had top billing, unheard of for an actor under 5'6". He haunted films, not with stature, but with presence. When he died in 1964, the New York Times called him a short, pudgy man who could take over every scene with his own special kind of evil. Burgess Meredith stood 5'5½". Not tall, not imposing, but his voice filled theaters. In 1935, a director told him to project across Times Square. He did, and got 29 curtain calls. Hollywood came calling, and his first contract paid a fortune. He became the underdog, the outsider, the man who seemed too small but played enormous. In Of Mice and Men, critics said he was the tallest man on screen that night. World War II found him performing for thousands of soldiers, sometimes standing on ammo crates so he could be seen. In Story of G.I. Joe, he embodied resilience and won awards. Blacklisted in the 1950s, he survived by recording thousands of radio shows where no one could measure him. Then came television. As the Penguin on Batman, with his top hat and squawk, he became larger than life. And finally, in Rocky, at age 68, he played Mickey, the gravel-voiced trainer barking, "You're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder," a line that became history. His Oscar nomination sealed it. The short man with the huge voice was unforgettable. Lou Costello was just 5'5", paired with 6' Bud Abbott. He looked like a frantic, wide-eyed child, and he leaned into it. His high-pitched cries of "Hey Abbott" became comedy legend. In Buck Privates, 1941, their act pulled in more than $10 million from a $180,000 budget, a staggering return. Costello's short frame made his falls funnier, his stumbles sharper, his pratfalls more painful, but he was no weakling. In New Jersey, young Lou had been a boxer, 11 wins, 0 losses. He had won basketball free throw contests, despite shooting from a foot below the rim. He did his own stunts, learning how to trip and crash with perfection. He also fought for business control, reminding Abbott that audiences came to see the little guy squirm. During the war, he clambered onto tanks and bar counters to be seen, selling $85 million in war bonds. At his peak, he was making millions per picture. But tragedy struck in 1943 when his infant son drowned just before a live broadcast. Costello went on stage anyway, performed flawlessly, then collapsed in grief when the lights went dark. It changed how audiences saw him, not just a clown, but a man of strength beneath the laughter. Alan Ladd was another secret. Paramount claimed he was 5'6". In truth, he was closer to 5'5". Studio records show they paid for special elevator shoes every 6 months, calling them wardrobe maintenance. His big break came in This Gun for Hire with Veronica Lake, who was under 5 feet tall. Together, they looked perfectly matched. No co-star over 5'4", unless trenches were dug or platforms built. On Shane, Van Heflin, 6 feet tall, walked in trenches 1,200 feet long, and nearly $100,000 in cost. On Boy on a Dolphin, Sophia Loren had to walk in water beside a raised boardwalk just to balance his frame. Cameramen tilted frames 5 degrees to keep the illusion alive. Audiences didn't care. They loved it. By 1953, Ladd was a top box office star, earning more than taller legends like Gary Cooper. His son later said people saw him as the little guy who still won. In Shane, the final shot shows him tiny against towering mountains, delivering the line, "There's no living with a killing." His size made the moment heavier, not lighter. But the story of Hollywood's shortest stars can't end without the pioneers who embraced their stature openly: Angelo Rossito and Billy Barty. Rossito, barely 2'11", first appeared in Todd Browning's Freaks, 1932. Typecast, yes, but he kept working for decades, turning what others mocked into a career that spanned horror, fantasy, even cult films like Mad Max, Beyond Thunderdome. He never quit. Billy Barty, 3'9", became one of the most recognized little actors in Hollywood. He was cast in dozens of films, but more importantly, he fought for dignity. In 1957, he founded Little People of America, giving a voice to actors who had been props, side jokes, or spectacles. Barty reminded the industry that size was not the measure of talent, and that is the truth of Hollywood's biggest secret. These men, short in stature, towering in legacy, defied a system built on illusion. Studios lied, trenches were dug, co-stars were shrunk, shoes were padded. But the truth is, audiences didn't fall in love with inches. They fell in love with presence, with grit, with talent that no camera trick could hide. From Mickey Rooney's boyish charm to Sammy Davis Jr.'s boundless versatility, from Cagney's fire to Robinson's menace, from Chaplin's tramp to Keaton's stone face, from Lorre's haunted gaze to Meredith's gruff wisdom, from Costello's pratfalls to Ladd's icy cool, from Rossito's resilience to Barty's activism, their stories remind us that height never made a giant. Legacy did. Hollywood was built on illusions, but the legends who stood smallest left shadows that stretched across the world.